please turn off your cell phones. And I'm very happy this evening to have here Maestro Pavlo Gintov, because I fell in love with this way of playing through YouTube before I knew that he was in New York. And I discovered many great Ukrainian composers thanks to him, and also other Ukrainian musicians. I think that our new piano, this Bechstein with this European sound, fits very well the way of playing of Maestro Gintov. And this is also a special occasion because we gave an envelope for getting funds for Ukrainian, because we wanted to express our deep emotion every time we think about what's happening in Ukraine and our friendship for Ukrainian people. I know that there are some people also from the Ukrainian Institute and other institutions. So I'm not going to speak about the program because I cannot pronounce the name of the musicians. So I leave the floor to our Maestro Gintov. Please welcome him.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Finozzi, and to the Italian Cultural Institute to hosting this wonderful event, and to all of you for your support for Ukraine. And for coming today to this concert of all Ukrainian piano music, which is a deed that needs a lot of courage, right? To come to listen to completely unknown music. The names of composers is not easy to pronounce. So this statement is 100% true, but why is that? Why is that? Let's zoom out for a second and look at the map of Europe. And we're gonna leave the Western Europe, and particularly Italy for sure, because Italy has such a rich tradition with classical music. It's almost like a birthplace of music, right? This instrument is called piano. It's supposed to be forte piano, of course. Piano doesn't really make much sense, especially if you are Italian. But we're not going to talk about Italy or Germany or France, those countries that have centuries of musical tradition. But let's look into the Eastern Europe, countries that neighbor Ukraine, and think, can you name composers from those countries? For example, Poland, very easy, Chopin, right? You don't need any more music. If you have Chopin in your team, you can play a whole evening of Chopin music. It'll be wonderful, right? But of course, there's also Lutosławski, Penderecki, Szymanowski, many other wonderful Polish composers that you can think of. Hungary, easy list, Bela Bartok, a lot of wonderful music by wonderful composers. Let's say Finland, Sibelius, right? A very big name, right? If you stay up north, Norway, Edvard Grieg, of course, everyone loves Grieg, his music. So you see, every country has some really big names. But what are those big names in Ukraine? Again, if you look at the map, Ukraine takes a very big portion of that Eastern Europe, very big country, right? But what names come to mind to you if you talk about Ukrainian composers? Not so many names, am I right? And why is that? Is it because something is wrong with Ukrainians and they have not been able to produce anything in this musical world, even though each city in Ukraine has a music school and a conservatory, and sometimes several of them, and had it for centuries, so something seems a little bit off here, right? So I want to tell you a little bit about why these composers, why the names are not so commonly recognizable or heard, why the music is not very popular right now. And a little hint, it's not because it's bad music, it's not because the composers aren't bad, it's something else. Let me tell you a little story. And my introduction will be a little bit long, but then I'll promise I won't talk so much up to then. There is one piece, Ukrainian piece, that you all know, 100%. And that is a song, very short song, which is called Shedik. you all, each one of you here, know Shedrik. You know Shedrik? No? Shedrik is a very old Ukrainian folk song that is about the beginning of spring. Everyone knows it in Ukraine from their childhood, and most especially thanks to a composer of early 20th century whose name is Mykola Leontovich.
It's bad of itself.
Oh, okay, sure. So composer, a choral composer of the beginning of 20th century whose name is Mykola Leontovich, who wrote a huge number of works, original works, but also arrangements of the folk song. And one of them was this arrangement of Shedrik. Now, to understand the situation, it's important to talk a little bit about the context. In 1917, 1918, after World War I, the big empires collapsed. The Austrian-Hungarian Empire, Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and many smaller nations finally had a chance to emerge as independent states. Ukraine was one of them, and there was once independent Ukraine over 100 years ago, but it was very short-lived because right from the moment of its establishment, it finds itself at war with not just one power, but with many powers. For starters, it fought against the Red Army and also the White Army of Russia. Now, you know about that from the history, and history looks quite simple usually because we talk about whites fighting against Reds, but actually that was a very, very messy story with very many battling parts, and Ukraine was one of them and had to fight against both of those powers because neither the Reds, neither the Whites wanted to accept the idea of the independent Ukraine. So Ukraine had to fight both of them. Also, there was a lot of infighting. So again, if you want to get to some very, very messy history, look up what happened in Ukraine in the late 1910s, 1920s, and it's really fascinating, but again, as I said, very confusing. That, of course, resulted in the win victory of the Bolsheviks, the Reds, right? The whole Ukraine was occupied by them. So while fighting all these powers without army, without any help from the West, unlike today, and thank you to everyone in the whole world for supporting Ukraine today, because 100 years ago that was not the case, and it ended really, really badly and very sad. With no army, no guns, no manpower, no money, Ukraine was very quickly overrun by the Bolsheviks. And while fighting, while under these artillery barrages and attacks, the government of Ukraine did something really unprecedented. They decided to form a choir and send it off to the world to sing Ukrainian music and to introduce the world that there is a nation called Ukraine, which is right now suffering, struggling, fighting for its survival. So that was their strange idea. Like, you don't do that when you are being conquered. You don't hold auditions and establish choirs, right? But that's what they did. And the choir was named the Ukrainian Republican Capella, and off they went to Europe, where they sang in all countries. And then in 1922, they made it through the ocean to America, to New York City, and they sang a concert in Carnegie Hall, not too far away from where they are now. And in this concert, which was a big success, one of the pieces was Shedrik by Mykola Leontovich, the one I mentioned. And in the audience was a man whose name was Petro Vilhovsky. He was from Ukrainian origin. He was a choral conductor and also worked at the radio. And he really liked that song. So he decided to write English lyrics to it, which he did, rather unsophisticated English lyrics. And the sound of singing reminded him sound of the Christmas bells. So that's the lyrics he wrote. Merry, 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 Merry Christmas. Right? You probably have an idea what song I'm talking about. And he, as a choral conductor and also someone who worked on the radio, was able to record this song as a new English version and put it on the radio, and instantly it became very, very popular and really like a part of every year's Christmas that we can't even imagine Christmas without. And of course, I'm talking about the Carol of the Bells. That's the song. So now when you listen to a soundtrack of Home Alone or other countless movies and shows, you always credit Mykola Leontovich. And if you use, let's say, Spotify to listen to the music, he's the most popular Ukrainian composer with hundreds of thousands of listens, because when you listen to Carol of the Bells, that's where your listen goes towards him. He would be very surprised if he found out today, and probably also quite annoyed, because, as I said, he wrote a huge number of wonderful original choral works, and this tiny little 1-minute arrangement of a folk song is definitely not his main piece, but we don't know his music, we know this one little song, and everybody knows it. So this is actually quite an inspiring story of a song that got its second birth and conquered the world. And this choir idea actually ended up being even much more successful than those Ukrainians and the government could imagine, because the message was very powerful, and the world really got conquered with one song, which is much harder than any cannons or artillery shells of the world, right? So, but that story has also a very dark side because of what happened to its composer, Mykola Leontovich. In 1921, so a little bit before that song came to the United States, he was a teacher in the countryside. He kind of retired from the capital after the Bolsheviks took over, tried to lay low, as we would say, and he became a teacher in the countryside. And in the middle of the night, in December 1921, someone knocked at his door, and the person was the agent of Cheka being this newly formed Soviet secret police, later known as the KGB, and shot the composer with a rifle and killed him. That was 1921, so he would never know that his music actually became popular in any way. And this short story is actually quintessentially a story of Ukrainian music. That's what happened not to just one Leontovich, but to many, many other composers and artists and intellectuals and prominent Ukrainians. In that time, back in the beginning of the 20th century, Ukrainian intellectuals had two options. They could stay and find themselves at the mercy of this new regime, and as you can tell, that is not very friendly towards them, to say the least. Or they could leave. And if they leave, they sort of declare openly that they are hostile to this regime, that they don't accept it, and then their names are systematically erased. His music is banned and destroyed. All the memory is being destroyed, and then even in their home country, no one even knows about them after a few generations. They just vanish. They just disappear. And that's what happened to the first two composers of my today's program. The first one is Sergei Bortkiewicz, and that's the man who brought me here, basically, because Mr. Fenotti listened to my recording of his piano works, and he liked the music, and he wrote me a very nice email saying that it was a discovery, some new music he never heard about. But guess what? I'm a Ukrainian musician. I also never heard about Bortkiewicz until about 10 years ago. So imagine this. I studied music in Ukraine. I had a class of music history, Ukrainian piano literature, Ukrainian music history, and I never heard his name or some other names that I'll talk about today during that course. Right? It's a little bit strange to say. It's like if I was an American musician with a PhD in piano performance and suddenly I discovered for myself George Gershwin. It's totally ridiculous, but that's our reality. There is so much that was taken away from us, and as you can see, it's totally not your fault that you don't know these things, because even someone from Ukraine who professionally does that also doesn't necessarily know about these composers. So Bortkiewicz he chose the second. He didn't say he left. He was from the city of Kharkiv, second largest city, which is close to the border with Russia, which is now bombarded almost every day for 2 years and a half and is being beaten really badly. So he was from Kharkiv. He was a very wealthy man. His parents owned a distillery, believe it or not. So they were producing vodka and also bottles for that vodka. So they had a little factory to make glass. All of that was taken by the Bolsheviks. And this rich man, who was also, prior to that, professor of the Berlin Conservatory, a very successful pianist, performed all over Europe. He had to flee, leave everything behind and flee with no money, no means to survive. And for the rest of his life, he was a lifelong refugee and lived in different parts of Europe, mainly in Berlin and then later in Vienna. And he died as a professor of the Viennese Conservatory. But after his death in Ukraine, he was completely forgotten, because even those people who knew him from earlier, it's dangerous to mention the names of those who are considered enemies of state, right? So they don't talk about these people. The music is prohibited, not printed, not published, not performed. That's impossible to imagine. So after that, he was forgotten. And again, as I said, I never heard about him until 2014. And in 2014, as you may know, Russia invaded Ukraine and annexed the Crimean Peninsula. And that was a big shock to me. I used to go to Crimea every year with my parents. It's a very beautiful place. It's a favorite vacation destination for many Ukrainians. So I had wonderful memories from that place. And suddenly the place was cut off from the rest of the world and was slowly turning into military base / prison with all people who don't agree with this occupation being jailed and persecuted. So I wanted to include a piece about Crimea in my program. I wanted to create a program of Ukrainian music and I needed a piece about Crimea. So I was looking through many things, and I found this piece called Crimean Sketches. It's a cycle of 4 pieces by a composer, Sergei Bortkiewicz, whose last name looked very much like a Polish name. Now, I knew a wonderful Polish poet, the great Polish poet Adam Mickiewicz, who wrote a Crimean cycle, Crimean sonnets. That's really strange. I'm a Ukrainian musician. I know about the Polish poetry about Crimea, but I don't know about Ukrainian music about Crimea. And I was, for first 5 minutes, I was sure it's a Polish composer who maybe traveled to Crimea. And I looked him up and I realized he was from Kharkiv. And I was very, very embarrassed that I never heard of him. I love the music since the first glance on the score. I haven't heard it. I already could see wonderful Crimean nature. And I thought that's exactly the piece that I need. And then I looked up more music by this composer and ended up recording a whole CD of his piano, which is just very wonderful, romantic music. He is very conservative in his writing. He lived in the first half of the 20th century, but his music sounds like the great masters of the 19th century, like Liszt, Chopin, Schumann, Mendelssohn, and all that wonderful composers. So the first piece today is this Crimean Sketches, 4 parts. The first one is called the Rocks of Uch-Kosh. And it's truly the ode to the nature of Crimea, to the pine forests and Rocky Mountains, and of course the beautiful Black Sea. The second movement, Caprices of the Sea, is the sea, which is sometimes playful and elegant, and sometimes stormy and a little bit scary. The third one is called the Crimean Idyll, and this is a picture from the life of the indigenous population of Crimea, the Crimean Tatars, the people who are right now occupied and they don't have anywhere to go. This is their homeland, and they're really the least protected people in the world, probably, in my view. And the last one has very interesting title, Chaos, which I've kind of struggled about. I didn't know. There's nothing written about it, no information, so I didn't really know what this Chaos is about. And I went back to Ukraine and I performed a Bortkiewicz program, and I said from stage, like how I'm talking to you right now, I don't know what this piece is about. It's very interesting. Chaos, it has a fugato section, which is very, it's the least thing that comes to mind if I want to depict chaos. Fugato writing is very rational and organized, and chaos is chaos, right? And then my first piano teacher was in the audience, and after the concert she told me, you just don't know, but in Crimea there is a national park called Chaos, and apparently billions of years ago there was a volcano eruption. There are these huge chunks of lava scattered in a chaotic order, and it's a national park, and it's called Chaos. So this is what this piece is about. So for me, that was really big revelation, and since then I really can't wait when I can go back to our Ukrainian Crimea and see it with my own eyes. Well, hope you enjoy Sergei Bortkiewicz Crimean Sketches.